The networks of influence is a central idea in China. Like in US, most of the widely used translations are the corrections and the relationships, but neither of those terms sufficiently reflects the wide cultural implications. So Guanxi originates, I think, from the Chinese social philosophies of Confucianism, which stresses the importance of associating oneself with others in a hierarchical manner, which in order to keep the social and the economical order. So, I talked to you, Greg, about this. Say if there are 10 companies competing for a contract, so technically, the one who offers the lowest price will get the contract. But if we put the Guanxi into consideration, the result is going to be different. Because, like I said, my father's business, sometimes they have to take that into consideration. The mayor, the pressure from the mayor, from the senator, from the governor, something like that. So you have to consider that because they can destroy you easily if you don't take that into consideration. And
the society for organizing this wonderful event, bringing us to discussion on U.S., China, Western, Eastern cultural perspectives. Since cultures are usually a very pervasive and dynamic topic to talk about, observations on cultures are not very easy, in my opinion. And sometimes it can easily get overgeneralizing and stereotyping. So with the risk of being overgeneralizing myself, I would like to talk about the idea of polarities and transformation. And hopefully we can have more of an open-ended discussion and reflection. So first of all, I would like to begin my analysis with more of a Chinese tradition. When I was at this discussion with the professors here in University at Albany, we were talking about the rhetoric in Western tradition. And some graduate students, especially the Chinese graduate students, have been mentioning that they think there is not Chinese rhetoric. We don't have the tradition. When we talk, we're illogical and you can't get the meaning, but for Western rhetoric, you have a system that works with grammar and logic. So what I would like to say is, for Western rhetoric, it arises from debate, like in the ancient times, debate on law and on philosophy, on ideas. So it is more of a form of conversation. But for Chinese rhetoric, when we want to say something or when we want to have something being understood, in the ancient times, that is more said through allegories. So I would like to first begin my analysis with an allegory. That's Zhuangzi and the butterfly. Zhuangzi was an ancient Taoist Chinese philosopher who was a follower of Lao Tzu. And he said he had a dream. In the dream, he dreamed of himself becoming a butterfly. And then he woke up. But when he woke up, he said he was not sure whether it was him dreaming of becoming a butterfly or it was a butterfly dreaming of becoming a Zhuangzi, becoming him. So you have this very interesting interplay of subjectivity and objectivity going on and transforming to each other. And this is very important for the Chinese way of thinking. Nothing stays forever. So when it comes to opposing forces and the dynamic in between, it seems that for Western consciousness, there is a focus on the opposing part as more of a confrontational way, and people like to argue and debate. And there has to be a point. People like to say, what's the point? There has to be something fixed over there. But for Chinese, when we say, what's the point? That's two characters. One meaning intention, the other meaning thinking. So for us, it's not that absolute. It is more like the symbol. Okay. This is, I drew this one, not very good. This is yin and yang. And for yin, this is the dark side. It means the darkness. And for yang, that means the light. But you can see in the yang side, in this light side, there's always a dot of darkness. And in this darkness side, there is always a dot of light.
First of all, why me? Well, I have been to China. I have devotedly collected Chinese coins. And and I read The Economist. But I do not claim to be a professional Chinese expert, but here goes anyway. I am something of a China lover, and I want to start by saying that, and that China is a very great civilization with many accomplishments, a rich history and culture, much to admire. In the last 35 years, what China has achieved is the greatest human betterment in all of history. And I'm saying all of these things because the rest of my comments will not be quite so complimentary. When Greg phoned me to do this, I happened to be sitting and reading David Brooks's book, The Road to Character. And I asked myself, would such a book be written in China? Because there is something very Western about it. It's full of psychological analysis, pondering the big questions with a very humanistic approach. This is a book that was written for a society of individuals. And then I recalled the phrase Asian values, which was popularized by the late leader of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew. This was an attempt to dress up authoritarianism and paternalism as though reflecting deep cultural traditions as an alternative to Western values that emphasize democracy, human rights, the worth of the individual, and so forth. Now, we hear a lot of nonsense that America is not really a democracy. In fact, America is the way it is in large part because of voters getting what they want. It's simply untrue that money buys elections. Well-funded candidates often lose. But in China, there's no voting at all to speak of, certainly no political competition, no opposition allowed, and of course, no freedom of speech or the press. Lee Kuan Yew was not totally wrong. There is a real cultural difference. We Americans do value each individual as a person of worth unto himself or herself. Whereas in China, what's most important is one's role as part of a group. In the first place, the family, and more broadly, the whole society. Individuals just aren't seen as mattering that much for their own sakes. Compared to America and the West, Chinese society is more like an ant colony or a beehive, which biologist E.O. Wilson has likened to superorganisms, where the role of the individual ant or bee is equivalent to that of an individual cell in a human body. So the concept of human rights is viewed through a very different lens in China. One important element is the rule of law. China's president, Xi Jinping, talks a lot about rule of law, but the phrase means something different to him than to us. It's not a restraint on government, it's a tool for government to restrain citizens. The government and the Communist Party, which incidentally are still pretty much the same thing, are still above the law. China does have a constitution full of worthy platitudes, yet the word constitutionalism is seen as a subversive Western idea. Literally, people have been jailed simply for voicing the radical concept that the Constitution should be obeyed. I was one of those optimists believing that as China grew richer, it would naturally grow more democratic. And for a while, that seemed to be happening, albeit at a glacial pace. But now it's gone into reverse. President Xi is consolidating power to a degree unmatched since Mao, with an all-fronts crackdown upon anyone or anything seen as remotely challenging to the party's control.